My name is Athena Chambers. I'm 34 years old, and 2 days before Christmas, I stood on my parents' porch holding a tray of gingerbread for a party my son wasn't allowed to attend. No children this year, my mom had told me on the phone. None. It's simpler for everyone. I believed her. Then I looked through the front window and saw my sister's 3 kids sitting around the tree in matching pajamas, tinsel in their hair, halfway through a plate of cookies. My mother opened the door, filled the frame with her body, and said the sentence I will never forget. These children deserve to be here. But here's what none of them knew. 3 weeks earlier, I had found a piece of paper in my mother's junk drawer, folded between the coupons and the spare batteries. And what I did with that paper at their Christmas party ended $18,000 of lies and their hold on my family in under 4 minutes. Where women who kept the peace finally tell the truth about what it cost them. We share stories about family, money, and the moment a quiet person stops being quiet. If this story finds you at the right time, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, because you are going to want to be here for the ending. Cedar Grove, Ohio, is the kind of town where the pharmacist asks about your boy by name and means it. 9,000 people, 2 stoplights, 1 hospital. That hospital is where I've spent 11 years as a pediatric nurse, most of them on nights. I'm the one they call when a 2-year-old needs an IV and the first nurse can't get the vein. My hands don't shake. That's not bragging. It's training. In my job, panic is a luxury. Nobody pays a nurse to scream. The charge nurses call me the calm one, and I've learned that the calmer I get, the worse the news usually is. Keep that in mind. It matters later. At home, I'm just Caleb's mom. He's 6. He's missing a front tooth. He loves dinosaurs, and he believes wood glue can fix anything, which he learned from his grandpa Hal. Saturday mornings are pancakes. No exceptions. Even when I come off a 12-hour shift smelling like hand sanitizer and apple juice. Our house is small. 3 bedrooms, blue shutters, and it is paid for. Every board of it. Remember that too. I built this life the slow way. Nursing school on a scholarship, 2 jobs, secondhand textbooks, a car that started on the 3rd try if you were polite to it. No one handed me anything, and honestly, I liked it that way. When you assemble a life with your own hands, you know where every screw is. You know what it cost. What I didn't understand yet, that winter, was that somebody else had been doing math on my life too. Somebody who looked at everything I had and quietly decided that a piece of it belonged to them. They just never planned on asking me out loud. My husband's name was Travis Chambers. He was a lineman for the county electric co-op, the guy who climbed poles in freezing rain so other people's Christmas lights stayed on. In June of 2023, coming home from a storm repair job outside Marion, a pickup crossed the center line. Travis was 33, Caleb was 4, I was 31, and I learned that grief doesn't knock, it moves in. The co-op's life insurance came to $150,000. I didn't buy anything shiny with it. I paid off our house and put the rest in a college fund for Caleb. My husband is still paying for the roof over his son's head. That's who he was. His boots are still by the back door. I never moved them, and to their credit, nobody at the Chambers house ever asked me to. Because here's the thing about Travis's parents, Hal and Ruth. They didn't fade away after the funeral the way people warn you in-laws do. Every Sunday there is a chair for me and a booster seat for Caleb at their table, no invitation needed. Ruth taught Caleb to roll pie crust. Hal taught him to build a birdhouse, then let him hammer every nail crooked and called it character. They have an old apple orchard behind their place, 8 minutes from my house, and my son thinks it's the center of the world. I'm telling you about them now so you'll understand something later. I did not grow up believing family was a performance. I married into proof that it isn't. But not everyone looked at that insurance money and saw a widow's lifeline. Somewhere across town, someone was looking at it the way you look at an unlocked door. In January of 2024, 7 months after we buried Travis, my mother called and asked me to come by, alone. I drove the 12 minutes to my parents' house with my stomach in a knot. Lorraine Hollis does not ask. She arranges. In the kitchen, under the fluorescent light, she slid a letter across the table. Big red letters across the top. Past due. My father sat at the end of the table staring at the frozen backyard like it owed him something. Dad is Frank Hollis, 63 now. And to understand that stare, you have to know that in 2021, the plastics plant in Marion closed after 34 years of his life. 59 years old, standing in a job fair line next to kids fresh out of high school. Nobody called back. His pension came out smaller than promised, and these days he stocks shelves part-time at the warehouse of my brother-in-law's heating and cooling company. My mother folded her hands like she was in church. 10 more days and the bank starts the paperwork, Athena. We could lose the house you grew up in. Then her voice dropped to a whisper, like the neighbors could hear. Your father would rather die than let the guild ladies see a foreclosure sign on this lawn. The Brookside Ladies Guild is my mother's entire kingdom. She chairs the hospitality committee. Losing the house wouldn't just be losing a house. It would be losing her face in front of the only jury she's ever cared about. I looked at my dad's hands, cracked from 34 winters of shift work. I looked at the red letters, and I did what nurses do in an emergency. I moved toward it. I took out my phone right there at the table. Now, before you decide I was a fool, hear what I actually did, because I've replayed it 100 times. I did not just hand over cash. I said, let me call the credit union in the morning. I'll pay them directly, straight to the loan. My mother had an answer before I finished the sentence. The autopay was tied to Dad's account, she said. Changing who pays meant both of them at the branch, forms, signatures, and there was no time. 10 days, maybe less. Then she lowered the boom she knew would work. Your father will not stand at that counter while his daughter pays his debts in front of the whole town, Athena. That man has lost his job and half his pension. Let him keep something. I asked to see the statement. I want you to know that, I asked. She went to the bedroom and came back with a real one. Maple Valley Credit Union letterhead, the red stamp, the account number. It was folded in half, and her thumb held it while I read the balance line. The date on the corner sat under the crease. I did everything right except one thing. I let a folded corner stay folded. That night, I set up a standing transfer from my account to theirs, $650 on the first of every month, and I sent January's payment that same evening so the 10-day clock would stop. My mother cried at her kitchen table and called me her good girl, her responsible one. My father never turned around. He kept looking at that backyard, and his eyes were wrong, and I told myself it was shame about the money. It was shame, all right. I just had the wrong prescription for it. The transfers started, quiet as a heartbeat. They would not stop for 23 more months. The thing about a monthly transfer is that it becomes furniture. You stop seeing it. What I should have watched was everything stacked on top of it. In July of 2024, my mother needed gum surgery, $1,200, and insurance supposedly wouldn't touch it. She called me from the dentist's parking lot, voice thin as paper. I sent it. In March of 2025, the furnace died. $900. The repairman is standing in my kitchen right now, honey. I could hear a man cough near the phone. I sent that too. Every emergency had a deadline, a prop, and a performance, and everyone arrived at the exact moment I was too tired from a night shift to ask questions. Here's what else was happening in those same months, and I want you to hold both pictures up together the way I eventually had to. My sister Brittany posted a photo of a brand new minivan in her driveway with the caption, "Blessed." My niece Madison, who is 10 and lives in a cheer uniform, flew to nationals in Columbus with the whole Kessler family in matching t-shirts. Brittany is 37. Her husband Doug owns the heating and cooling company where my father stacks boxes, and everyone in town knew Doug's business had been limping since 2022. Yet somehow their life kept getting shinier while my parents' furnace kept dying. I noticed. I'm not blind. I told myself Doug's business must have turned around, that the minivan was financed, that cheer had scholarships. Nurses learn to chart everything. Daughters forget to. So the two pictures hung side by side in my head for months, and I kept not connecting them, because the wire between them ran straight through my mother's kitchen, and I wasn't ready to follow it. While my bank account was being farmed, something quieter was happening to my son, and I want to be clear that I did not let it slide. Thanksgiving of 2024, my mother set the grandkids' places at the big table. Madison, Kayla, Tyler, cloth napkins, the good glasses. Caleb's plate sat on a card table in the garage, next to the recycling bins. "For space," she said. I didn't make a speech. I picked up my plate and Caleb's, carried them to the garage, and we ate out there together with our coats on, laughing about our breath-making clouds. On the way out, I said one thing, level as a bubble in a carpenter's tool. If the garage is good enough for my son, it's good enough for me. After that, I cut our visits to once a month. I don't argue about chairs. I just change where I sit. Then came Caleb's 6th birthday in June of 2025. A card arrived, signed Grandma and Grandpa in my mother's hand, with a $5 bill inside. The same week, Madison got a grandparents' weekend in Columbus, hotel, cheer competition, a new warm-up jacket in the photos. I called my mother and asked, calmly, why one grandchild got a weekend and another got $5. She sighed like I was the unreasonable one. "Madison's activities are expensive, Athena. Caleb is 6. He doesn't know the difference." My son knew the difference. 6-year-olds always know the difference. They just don't have the words for it yet, so they hand the hurt to their mothers to carry. I hung up polite, and I remember thinking that this was as bad as my family was going to get. It wasn't even the rehearsal. Let me show you what $650 a month actually costs, because the money is the smallest part. It's 2 extra 12-hour shifts every month, which means 2 more mornings Caleb eats cereal at Ruth's counter while his mother sleeps with earplugs in. It's the swim lessons I pushed back a season. It's the tires I nursed into November praying the first snow would come late. There was a budget sheet taped inside my cupboard door, and the top line, before groceries, before Caleb, said Mom and Dad. I looked at that sheet every morning while the coffee dripped, and I felt something I couldn't name yet, a knot right under my ribs. I called it guilt. Nurses are good at renaming pain until the shift is over. Then came the first week of November 2025. My mother's voice on the phone was warm as syrup. The family Christmas party was going to be at their house on Christmas Eve this year. The guild ladies were invited. The pastor's wife. Everyone. And could I help with the food? $300. Just this once, times being what they were. I said yes before she finished. Of course I did. And then, almost as an afterthought, she added the new rule. "Oh, and sweetheart, we're keeping it adults only this year. No children. None. It's simpler for everyone." I remember standing in my kitchen holding the phone after she hung up, looking at the drawing of a T-Rex in a Santa hat that my son had taped to the refrigerator that morning. I had just bought the food for a party my 6-year-old was banned from, and the guest list, it would turn out, still had one more surprise stitched into it. Here's the part that still puts a splinter in my chest. Before I could figure out how to tell Caleb about the party, he showed me what he'd been building in Grandpa Hal's workshop for 3 evenings straight. A wooden star, palm-sized, cut a little crooked, sanded soft, painted gold with more enthusiasm than accuracy. On the back, in wobbly letters he'd burned with Hal's wood-burning tool, while Hal hovered like a nervous surgeon, it said, Grandma L. "It's an ornament," he told me, gap-toothed and glowing. "For Grandma Lorraine's tree. Can I give it to her at the party?" I called my mother back that night. I kept my voice easy. I asked for 15 minutes, just 15, at the start of the evening, so a 6-year-old could hand his grandmother a wooden star and leave before the adults sat down. She didn't even pause to pretend to think about it. "Rules are rules, Athena. Don't make this hard." Then, softer. "The way you talk someone off a ledge you push them onto. Christmas is for grown-ups this year. He won't even remember it by Easter. He won't even remember it." I looked across the living room at my son, who still remembered the exact seat he'd been given in the garage a year ago, who remembered that Madison's shoes came from Grandma, who remembered everything, because children are made of memory and hope in roughly equal parts. I told him Grandma's party was going to be boring, all taxes and coffee, and that we'd find a better spot for the star. He took that the way kids take things, quietly, and went back to his dinosaurs. The star sat on our counter for weeks, pointing its crooked gold arms at me like a question I hadn't answered yet. That Sunday, in Ruth's kitchen, I watched what the other version of family looks like. Flour on the counter, Caleb standing on a chair cutting biscuits with a water glass, Hal drawing plans for a birdhouse addition like it was a courthouse. Ruth was already plotting Christmas morning at the orchard. Cocoa on the porch, paper crowns, Hal threatening to climb on the roof with sleigh bells, which at 67 would have been a genuine medical event. Then Ruth handed me a towel and asked, in that mild voice that misses nothing, "So they asked you for party money? For a party the little one can't attend?" I started explaining. Times were hard. Dad's pension, the furnace, the guild ladies coming, and how it was easier to help than to fight about it. Ruth dried her hands and looked at me the way she looks at a pie that isn't setting right. "Honey, you don't owe anyone a bridge that only carries traffic one way." She didn't push past that. That's Ruth. She plants a sentence and lets the weather do the rest. But driving home that night, 8 minutes of dark road and Christmas lights, I felt the knot under my ribs turn over. Somebody outside my own head had finally said the quiet thing out loud. The money went one way. The love went one way. The rules only ever landed on one child in this family, and it was mine. I gripped the wheel and did what I always do with pain that has no chart yet. I filed it. Christmas was 3 weeks out. I told myself I'd get through the holidays first, keep the peace one more season. The junk drawer had other plans. If you've ever handed your family money and told yourself the knot in your stomach was just guilt, stay with me. I ignored that knot for 2 years, and it cost me $18,000 to learn what it was trying to say. If you're new here, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, has family ever made you feel like a bank with a heartbeat? Thanksgiving 2025 was one of our once-a-month visits, and I almost skipped it. The house smelled like sage and scorekeeping. Brittany arrived with the kids in coordinated plaid, Doug talking about truck payments at a volume that suggested he wanted witnesses, and Madison came bouncing through the living room in brand new cheer shoes, white with glitter trim, the kind that cost more than my electric bill. She did a toe touch in the hallway and nearly took out the china cabinet, and everybody laughed, and the afternoon rolled on the way those afternoons do, with my mother conducting the room like an orchestra, and my son parked in a corner with his dinosaurs, careful, watchful, small. It was the car ride home that split the seam. Caleb was in his booster seat watching the streetlights go by, and he said it the way kids say enormous things, no drumroll at all. Madison said Grandma bought her cheer shoes. A pause, then the part that put a hairline crack straight through me. Grandma never buys me shoes. I looked at my own eyes in the rearview mirror and watched them change. Because I was doing math now. Finally, the math I'd been refusing to do for 2 years. Cheer shoes, nationals in Columbus, a minivan with a blessed caption, a furnace that died the same spring. Kids don't know which sentences are made of glass. They just hand them to you. And I remembered something else from that afternoon, a half-second I'd filed and forgotten. When Madison was spinning in those shoes, telling everyone Grandma got them, my mother's face didn't glow. It went still. Plaster still. The face of a woman doing damage assessment. I drove the rest of the way home under the speed limit, both hands on the wheel. I didn't sit on it. The next evening, I called my mother, kept my voice light as a grocery list, and asked, "Did you buy Madison's cheer shoes?" She laughed. She was ready, which should have told me everything, but ready people sound exactly like innocent people on the phone. The consignment sale at the church, honey, $12. That child tells everyone Grandma bought her something because it makes her feel fancy. You know how Madison is. And here's the thing. There really was a consignment sale at the church in October. I'd seen the flyer myself, taped to the door by the choir room. The lie had scaffolding. Good lies always do. I said something pleasant and hung up, and I stood in my kitchen wanting to believe her so badly my teeth hurt. Believing her was cheaper. Believing her meant my family was just thoughtless, which is survivable, instead of organized, which is something else. But I've been a nurse too long. When a chart doesn't add up, you don't argue with it. You don't cry on it. You flag it and you keep watching the patient. So that's what I did with my own mother. I flagged her. I stood in front of the refrigerator, in front of my budget sheet with Mom and Dad written on the top line, and I gave the numbers one more chance to be innocent. $12. Consignment. A generous version of events for a 10-year-old who liked to feel fancy. Fine. I'd have swallowed the whole thing, probably forever, and this would be a very different story. I might have believed that $12 until the day I died if it weren't for a pair of scissors. The first week of December, my mother called again. The tank was low, propane prices were up, winter came early. Could I send $200? By then, the knot under my ribs had learned to talk, so I tried something new. I didn't send money. I went shopping. I filled 4 bags with the heavy staples: soup, coffee, flour, the decent peanut butter, and at the hardware store I bought a prepaid propane card, the kind you hand the delivery driver. Then I drove the 12 minutes over and carried it all into her kitchen myself. I want you to watch my mother's face the way I watched it, because for 1 second the mask was late. When she saw groceries instead of an envelope, before the smile could load, her face showed pure, undecorated disappointment. The kind you show when a machine gives you the wrong change. Then the smile arrived, on time and wrong, and she said, "You're so thoughtful, sweetheart. But next time, just send the money. It's easier. I know what we need." I stacked cans into her pantry with my back to her so she couldn't see my face doing its own math. Groceries feed a house. They just don't feed whatever my money had been feeding. A propane card can't sit in a cheer gym in Columbus. Soup can't make a minivan payment. I didn't say any of that. I said the pantry looked low on coffee, and that Caleb had drawn her a T-Rex in a Santa hat, and she said, the way you answer a radio. 2 years of emergencies, and the one time I brought the actual things a struggling house needs, I'd somehow gotten it wrong. I dried my hands on her Christmas towel and asked where she kept the scissors. The propane card came zip-tied to a cardboard backer, and my mother's kitchen scissors live where every mother's scissors live, in the junk drawer by the wall phone, 3rd drawer down, the one that has held the same population of batteries, rubber bands, coupons, and dead pens since the Reagan administration. My mother wasn't even in the room. Brittany had called about the party trays, and Lorraine took Brittany's calls the way surgeons take pages, instantly, in another room, with the door half shut. So I was alone in the kitchen where I grew up, listening to the murmur of my mother's telephone voice down the hall, and I pulled open the junk drawer looking for scissors. They were there, under the coupon envelope. So was something else. A window envelope from Maple Valley Credit Union, addressed to Frank and Lorraine Hollis, already slid open, 1 page thick. I know that logo the way I know my own name tag. It's the logo I'd been sending $650 toward on the first of every month for nearly 2 years. To this day, I can't tell you I meant to do anything more than move it aside. That's the truth. My fingers were on the scissors, but the envelope had shifted, and the page inside had slid halfway out, and printed across the top of that page, in the plain, bold type that banks use when they are not worried about anything at all, were words that did not belong in the same house as the words past due. I stood very still. Down the hall, my mother laughed at something my sister said. I set the scissors on the counter, and I unfolded that page right there next to the coupons, and the kitchen went very, very quiet. It was a payoff letter, the kind a bank mails once in the life of a loan, addressed to Frank and Lorraine Hollis, dated 9 years back, and my parents had kept it the way other people keep a diploma. 1 paragraph. This letter confirms that mortgage account ending 4471 has been paid in full as of October 14th, 2016. I read it 3 times, the way I double-check a medication dose, hoping the second and third read will fix the first. October 2016. 9 years ago. 9 years before my mother slid a past-due letter across this same table with her hands trembling on cue. Unless they had borrowed against the house again, there had been nothing here to foreclose on since before Caleb was born, since before Travis and I had even talked about children. That was the one door still open, and I decided, standing right there next to the coupons, that I would close it myself. I want to be honest about what I did next, because people imagine themselves screaming in that kitchen, and I understand the appeal. I didn't scream. 11 years of night shifts have built something into me that takes over when the news is worst, a stillness that arrives like a second nurse. I memorized the account number. I memorized the date. I folded the page along its original crease, exactly, and set the envelope back under the coupons at the same angle I'd found it. I closed the drawer. I cut the propane card free, left it on the counter with the scissors squared on top, carried in the last grocery bag, kissed my mother's cheek while she was still on the phone with my sister, and drove the 12 minutes home with the radio off. 9 years. Unless that last door held a surprise, I had been saving a house that was never drowning because somebody figured out that a grieving nurse pays her family's bills without asking to see the wound. That night, after Caleb was asleep with one arm around a stuffed triceratops, I sat at my kitchen table and did what I should have done 2 years earlier. I charted it. I logged into my own bank account, and I printed every transfer to my parents since January 2024. They came out of the printer in neat gray rows, patient as evidence. 24 transfers of $650, January 2024 through the 1st of this December. $15,600. Then the specials. Gum surgery, July 2024, $1,200. Furnace, March 2025, $900. Christmas party food, November 2025, $300. I wrote it all on a sheet of Caleb's graph paper, 1 line per wound, and totaled it at the bottom the way I total intake and output at the end of a shift. $18,000. Even. Then I opened Facebook. Because my sister has never once locked her life, she displays it, and I matched dates. The week of the dying furnace, March 2025, the Kessler family was at Cheer Nationals in Columbus. 4 tickets, 2 hotel rooms, matching shirts that said Madison's Army. The week of the gum surgery, July 2024, the minivan appeared in their driveway with the caption, Blessed. I sat back and looked at the 2 columns, my emergencies and her milestones, lined up like a heart monitor and a receipt. Every emergency in my mother's house lined up with a party in my sister's. I didn't need a detective. I needed a printer and 1 quiet hour. And under all the cold arithmetic, 1 warm thought kept surfacing, the one that finally made it hurt. Dad signed for that house. Dad knew. Dad watched me pay. Here's something most people don't know, and it's the reason this story ends with paper instead of a shouting match. When a mortgage is paid off, the lender files a release, a satisfaction of mortgage, with the county recorder. It's a public record. Anyone can walk in and ask. No lawyer, no drama, a few dollars for a certified copy. So on my lunch break the next day, still in my scrub top, I walked into the Arden County Recorder's office on the 1st floor of the courthouse annex and gave the clerk my parents' names. It took her about 4 minutes. Satisfaction of mortgage, Maple Valley Credit Union, releasing the mortgage of Frank and Lorraine Hollis, recorded October 2016. Then she ran the index forward for me, 2016 to now. No new mortgage, no home equity loan, no liens. The last door closed with a click only I could hear. She stamped my copy, certified, with the raised county seal you can feel under your thumb like Braille. The county doesn't lie for anybody. That's the nicest thing about paperwork. On the way back to work, I stopped at the credit union, and I want to be careful here, because the teller did nothing wrong. I asked no questions about my parents' accounts, and she'd have refused me if I had. I asked general questions. Do late notices go to anyone besides the account holder? No. And when did the statement format change? She showed me a sample of their current past due letter, redesigned in 2019, new logo, blue banner. The letter my mother slid across her kitchen table in January of 2024 had the old red stamp, the format from years before. It was a real letter. It was just a fossil, saved from another decade and reused like a stage prop. Now I knew what. I knew how much. I knew how long. What I still didn't know was how my father sat through every act of it. I worked a night shift with all of it sitting in my chest like a swallowed stone. Somewhere around 3 a.m, restocking a supply cart in a quiet hallway, it landed on me what this feeling actually was. I've sat across from parents in the family room off the PEDS ward and handed them the worst sentence of their lives, and I've watched the moment they stop hearing the machine beeps and start hearing their new world. That was me now. I'd been handed a diagnosis about my own family, and the disease had been growing for 2 years with no symptoms I'd let myself read. When I got home that morning, I didn't sleep. I pulled down the box where I keep Travis's papers, looking for my own copy of the insurance paperwork, wanting the numbers straight before I did anything at all. And tucked between the folders, I found the card. Travis bought it for Caleb's first birthday, wrote in it, and we agreed we'd give it to him when he was older. I'd forgotten the exact words. His handwriting is terrible. Electrician's hands. And I traced it twice to be sure. Be the kind of man who tells the truth, even when his voice shakes. I sat on the floor of my bedroom with that card for a long time. Then I made 2 decisions, and I made them in the order that mattered. First, no ambush, no Facebook post, no screaming phone call, because I am not in the business of performances. That's my mother's trade. Second, someone in that house was going to get one clean chance to tell the truth on his own. I decided to give my father one chance to be the man on that card. On December 14th, I went to find him. But first I drove the 8 minutes to the orchard, because if I've learned anything, it's that you don't walk into surgery without a consult. Ruth poured 2 mugs of the strong stuff, and I laid it all on her kitchen table. The certified copy with the raised seal, the graph paper ledger with 18,000 at the bottom. The dates that matched my sister's celebrations like a dance card. Ruth read everything twice without a word, and Ruth is the only person I know whose silence feels like being held. Through the window I could see Hal and Caleb on the porch, fixing a hinge on the birdhouse, my son holding the screwdriver with his tongue out sideways, exactly how Travis used to. Finally, Ruth set down the ledger and said, "What do you want, Athena? Not what do they deserve. What do you want?" I told her the truth. I wanted it to stop. I wanted my son never again to be the only child in a garage. And I did not want to become the person screeching in a driveway, because that person loses even when she's right. Ruth nodded slowly. Truth told calm is still the truth, but you tell it standing up, not kneeling. We built the plan right there between the mugs. Step 1. My father gets asked directly, privately, one chance for the truth with a door he could walk through with dignity. Step 2. If the lying continued, and especially if it continued in public, then the truth would be told in public once, with the paper doing the talking. Ruth walked me to my car and squeezed my hand on the porch step. You're not burning a bridge, honey. You're just done paying the toll on it. December 14th, lunchtime. I found my father exactly where I knew he'd be, on the loading dock of Doug's warehouse, alone, eating a sandwich out of the same dented lunchbox he's carried since before I was born. 34 years at the plant, and when it closed, the lunchbox was what he walked out with. I sat down next to him on an overturned crate and didn't dress it up. The mortgage was paid off in October 2016, Dad. I've seen the county record, the release. I've been sending money for a foreclosure that doesn't exist for almost 2 years. His hands went still on the lunchbox lid, and then they shook. And my father does not have shaking hands. He has hands that rewired our basement one weekend. He didn't deny it. I'll give him that one thing, and I've turned it over many nights since. He looked out at the parking lot and said, "Your mother handles the envelopes, honey. A man's got to keep something." Then, quieter, like a confession that had been waiting years for a priest. It was supposed to stop after a few months. I asked him the only question I'd brought. "Will you tell the truth at Christmas? To everyone? I'll stand next to you while you do it." And I watched my father, who once carried me on his shoulders through the county fair, look down at a concrete floor and choose. Don't make me choose, Athena. Your mother, your sister, this job. He gestured at the warehouse behind him with his chin. Doug's warehouse, my sister's husband's warehouse, the only place still willing to hand a 63-year-old man a paycheck and a reason to get up. I stood, kissed the top of his head, and left him with his sandwich. Before I tell you what I did with that county stamp, let me say this. If a nurse from Ohio can sit on a loading dock across from her own father and keep her voice level, then you can survive the conversation you've been avoiding too. Subscribe if you're staying for the party, because everything you've heard so far was just the table setting. My father went home that night and told my mother. I know because the phone tree lit up before the weekend, and it was not an apology tour. It was a controlled burn. My mother did not call me. She called around me. She called her sister-in-law, my Aunt Carol, and at least 2 guild ladies, and the story she planted was smooth as a funeral lily. Poor Athena. She hasn't been right since Travis passed. She's gotten strange about money. counts every dollar she's ever given us out loud, and now she's imagining some conspiracy about the house. Pray for her. It's a classic move, and I want you to learn it the way I had to. When a liar knows the truth is coming, they don't argue with the evidence. They discredit the witness in advance, so that when you finally speak, the room hears grief instead of facts. There was just one crack in her plan, and its name was Carol. Aunt Carol is my father's younger sister, 58, sharp as a tack, and allergic to perfume of every kind, including the verbal kind. She'd watched the plant close. She knew exactly whose warehouse signed her brother's little paycheck, and she'd wondered out loud at more than one holiday how Frank and Lorraine were managing so comfortably. So instead of praying for me, Carol called me. "Your mother's telling the family you've gone strange about money," she said. No hello, because Carol wastes nothing. "What's really going on, child?" I looked at the yellow folder already sitting squared on my counter, and I kept my answer short, because some invitations work better than explanations. "Come to the Christmas party, Aunt Carol. Watch who goes strange." 2 days later, my sister called, and Brittany opens every negotiation with sugar. "Hey, Mom says you're coming Christmas Eve, yay! It's going to be so nice." Then the pivot, bright as a knife under a dish towel. It's adults only, so don't make it weird about Caleb, okay? He'll live." I said nothing, which with Brittany is like leaving a door open in a wind. She kept going, and her voice dropped out of the sugar register into something older, something I recognized from childhood arguments over the last of everything. "And Athena? Whatever little spreadsheet you think you're building over there, stop. Stop counting other people's blessings. Some of us work for what we have. Some of us didn't get a widow's jackpot." A widow's jackpot. My husband came home from a storm job in a closed casket, and to my sister, the insurance that paid off his son's bedroom was a lottery win, an unfairness done to her. People show you their arithmetic eventually. In Brittany's ledger, everything I had was luck, everything she had was earned, and the $18,000 that flowed from my night shifts through my mother's kitchen into her minivan was just the universe correcting its error. I did not explain the numbers to her. You don't argue with a ledger written in crayon. I said, "See you at the party, Britt," gentle as a nurse taking a blood pressure, and I hung up while she was still mid-sentence, which I'm told is rude, and which I have decided to live with. She thought my quiet meant she'd won. I let her think it. Wrapping paper stays on until the morning. That's the whole point of wrapping paper. Let me show you what I actually brought to that party, because it fit in a purse and it weighed less than a paperback. One yellow folder, the same kind we use for charts at the hospital, because you use the tools your hands trust. Inside, 3 pages. Page 1, the certified copy of the Satisfaction of Mortgage, October 2016, with the raised seal. Page 2, my graph paper ledger, 24 transfers plus 3 emergencies, $18,000 even, each line dated. Page 3, a simple column of matched dates, her emergencies on the left, my sister's celebrations on the right. No commentary, because the dates didn't need any help. That week I also stopped by my bank and asked one question. If I cancel a standing transfer on the app, when does it take effect? Immediately, the young man said. 4 taps. I thanked him and left it running. I want you to understand why, because this is the part I'd underline if this were a chart. I wasn't building an ambush. I was building a choice. I made myself a quiet rule at my kitchen table, and I wrote it on a sticky note I did not bring. If they told the truth at that party, or even just said nothing, then the conversation would happen in private, in January, family only, door closed. But if they stood in that living room, in front of the guild and the pastor's wife, and told the lie one more time with my food on their table, then the truth would be spoken exactly where the lie lived, in public. Once, calmly. I've handed families worse news with steadier hands than this would need. That folder weighed less than a chart, and I've carried charts with whole lives in them. December 23rd, late afternoon, I drove over to deliver what I'd promised for the party, a tray of gingerbread and the good cheese board, because whatever else was true, I'd said I would bring food, and I keep my word even to people who don't. Caleb was at the orchard helping Ruth butter cookie sheets, so I was alone when I pulled up to my parents' house and saw the glow in the front window. And then I saw what the glow was lighting. My sister's 3 kids, Madison, Kayla, and Tyler, in matching red plaid Christmas pajamas, draping tinsel on the tree while a holiday movie flickered on the TV, wrapping paper and ribbon all over the rug, Brittany filming them on her phone with one hand and eating from a bowl of popcorn with the other. 2 days before the adults-only party. In the house where my 6-year-old couldn't get 15 minutes to hand his grandmother a wooden star. I rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door and did not invite me in. She filled the doorway, actually set her hand on the frame, and behind her rose the sound of her real grandchildren laughing at her real tree. I kept my voice level. "No children this year, Mom?" And my mother, my church hospitality committee mother, looked me in the eye and delivered it without a flicker. "These children deserve to be here." Behind her shoulder, Brittany appeared, smiling like oil on water. I looked at the two of them framed in the doorway of the house I'd been rescuing for 2 years, and I handed my mother the gingerbread. "I'll see you tomorrow night," I said. I walked back to my car and my hands were steady. I drove home and ironed my good green dress. That evening, Caleb asked me, one more time, if he could come to Grandma Lorraine's party, and he asked it carefully, the way kids ask when they already suspect the answer, holding the wooden star in both hands like a ticket. I got down on my knees so we were eye to eye, because the big sentences should never be delivered from above. "You're going to have Christmas where people are happy to see you," I told him. "That's the only kind we do from now on. That's the new rule, and Mom doesn't break rules." He thought about it with his whole face, and then he asked if the orchard had a chimney, and just like that we were fine, because 6-year-olds check the important things. He spent the night of the 24th at Hal and Ruth's, flower on his sleeves by sundown, and I have never in my life been so glad to have my son 8 minutes away and one entire world apart from where I was going. Back home, I ironed the green dress, the one Travis called my courtroom dress because I wore it whenever life required signatures. I set the yellow folder next to my keys. I painted my nails and steadied the polish brush the way I steady a syringe. And on my way to bed, I stopped at the shelf where Travis's picture sits, that grin he wore at the top of every poll, and I told him the plan, out loud, because some conversations don't care about physics. "You'd hate this party," I said. "You'd love what I'm bringing to it." Then I went to sleep. 8 full hours, the guilty toss and turn all night, the finished sleep just fine. Christmas Eve, 7 o'clock. My parents' house looked like the cover of a magazine that doesn't exist anymore. Electric candles in every window, the tree dressed to the collarbone in gold, a buffet table running the length of the dining room wall, and I'll note for the record that the ham platter anchoring the center of that table was the ham platter my $300 bought, wearing a sprig of rosemary like it had always lived there. 20-some guests moved through the downstairs with punch cups. 4 ladies from the Brookside Guild, helmets of silver hair and eyes like auditors. Eileen, the pastor's wife, who radiates a kind of quiet that makes people confess at potlucks. Aunt Carol, posted by the bookcase, watching the room the way I watch a monitor. Doug, loud by the fireplace, retelling a story about a supplier who'd tried to shortchange him, a story in which he was somehow both the victim and the genius. And on the staircase, in church clothes, sat my sister's 3 children, the adult's only rule having died quietly at the door it was invented to guard. Tyler waved at me. I waved back, because none of this was ever going to be about the children. My mother crossed the room in hostess formation, took my arm, and presented me to the guild ladies like an exhibit. "You all know my youngest, the nurse. She stays so busy, we hardly see her. Honey, with a pin inside it." I smiled, said the punch was lovely, and let her steer me past. The yellow folder sat in my purse against my hip, patient as a stethoscope. Every lie in that house wore velvet that night. I was the only thing in the room without a costume. It came, when it came, wearing a smile and holding a punch cup. Around 8, Brittany dinged a spoon against her glass and called for a toast, and the room obliged, and my sister raised her cider toward our mother with tears arranged neatly in the corners of her eyes. "To Mom, who holds this family together with her own 2 hands." Glasses went up, cheers went around. And then Sandra from the Guild, 4 decades of church suppers and 0 unspoken thoughts, said the thing that lit the fuse without knowing it was a fuse. "Lorraine, Honestly, I don't know how you two do it on a pension, with everything so dear these days. You keep this house so beautifully. The room hummed agreement, and my mother, warm with cider and lamplight and 20 guests' worth of admiration, straightened her spine, put her hand flat on her chest, and said it. We manage because we don't owe anybody anything. We have never taken a dime from anyone. Everything in this house, Frank and I earned. The clock on the mantel ticked twice. I felt the room the way you feel a patient's pulse, that whole hand knowing. My father was looking at the carpet like it was deep water. Carol was looking at me, and I heard my own heartbeat do the thing it does in a code, when everyone else's panic hits the ceiling and mine drops through the floor, slow and wide and very clear. There's a moment in the emergency room, right before you call it, when the noise stops and the room turns to you and waits. The living room did exactly that, though nobody in it knew yet, when I set my punch cup on the bookcase, next to Carol, who took it from me without being asked, like a nurse taking an instrument. Mom, I said, and my voice came out at the volume I use for medication instructions, low enough that everyone leans in. Tell them about October 2016. You could hear the furnace come on, the one I'd apparently bought. My mother's smile stayed up, but it stopped reaching anything, and she said, Athena, honey, this is a party. I agreed with her. It was a party. And then I did what I'd promised myself at my kitchen table. No speech, no trembling finale, just the facts in the order they happened, delivered the way I deliver lab results, because facts don't need my temperature. In January of 2024, you showed me a past due letter and told me the bank would start foreclosure in 10 days. Since then, I've sent $650 on the first of every month, 24 months. I paid $1,200 for gum surgery, $900 for a furnace, and $300 toward tonight. I nodded at the buffet. That platter of ham is mine, $18,000, all told. Nobody moved. Doug's mouth was open, mid-story forever. I reached into my purse, took out the folder, and laid page 1 on the white tablecloth, turned so the room could see it, the raised seal catching the lamplight the way embossed things do. This is a certified copy from the Arden County Recorder's Office. Anyone can get one. It's public. My mother's hand went out for it, and I didn't stop her, because you can't crumple a fact, only a copy of it. Satisfaction of mortgage, I said, to the room now, gently, like reading the tag on a Christmas gift. Paid in full, October 2016. The clock ticked. Somewhere on the staircase, a child's shoe scuffed a step. 9 years before you cried at your kitchen table about losing this house, it was already yours. There was never any foreclosure. There was never any loan. Sandra from the guild set down her plate without a sound. Eileen, the pastor's wife, lowered her cup onto its saucer, and the porcelain rang once, small and bright, like a bell in a courtroom. And Aunt Carol stepped forward, picked the certified copy up off the tablecloth, read it top to bottom through the glasses on her chain, and looked at my mother with 60 years of shared history draining out of her face. Lori, she said, this is the county seal. Nobody in that room argued with the county seal. My voice, the whole time, stayed quieter than the dishwasher. Brittany broke first. Brittany always breaks first. I just spent years mistaking it for confidence. She came off the couch with her cider sloshing and her voice up in the smoke alarm register, and in front of the pastor's wife, the guild, and her own children on the stairs. She screamed the confession I hadn't even accused her of yet. It's family money. It stayed in the family. The room took that in. I let it finish landing before I answered, level as a bubble. So was mine. Then came my mother, and I watched her run through her whole repertoire in about half a minute, because a cornered performer just plays every song she knows. First, the papers were wrong. Banks make mistakes constantly. Then I was cruel, doing arithmetic against my own mother at Christmas in front of guests. Then the mask came all the way off, and her voice went to a hiss I'd never heard from her in my life. Ungrateful. 18 years I raised you, and you stand in my house counting. Doug took a step toward me with his chest leading, and that's when my father stood up. Frank Hollis, who had not raised his voice indoors in my lifetime, said, "Sit down, Doug." And Doug sat, the way men like Doug always sit when a real voice finally arrives. Then Dad turned to my mother, and quieter, with a lunchbox tiredness in it. Lori, it's done. He didn't defend me. Let's be accurate about my father. He just stopped lying, which after 2 years was its own kind of thunder. Brittany, drowning now, spat the last secret out as a weapon. I told Mom to keep your kid home. He repeats everything he hears. There it was, in front of witnesses. The adults' only rule had exactly one child's name on it. I took out my phone, opened the banking app, and tapped 4 times. Then I turned the screen to the room. Standing transfer, canceled. The support ends tonight, I said. All of it. You told me these children deserve to be here. You were right about one thing, Mom. Deserving matters. My son deserves better than a family he has to be snuck past. I picked up my purse, left the folder on the tablecloth where it lay, because I had my own copies and they needed theirs, and I wished the room a Merry Christmas at conversational volume. Nobody answered. On my way down the hall, I passed the staircase, where my sister's 3 kids sat wide-eyed in their church clothes, and I stopped for half a second, because there are lines even a bonfire shouldn't cross. It's not your fault, girls. Tyler. Madison looked at me with an expression I recognized, a kid doing math she shouldn't have to do. Then I opened the front door and stepped out into the first real snow of the season, the fat, unhurried kind, and heard the noise start behind me through the glass, my mother's voice climbing, Brittany's voice climbing over it, Doug's rumbling underneath, the sound of a kingdom auditing itself. The door opened again before I reached my car. It was Carol, carrying my scarf, and she wrapped it around my neck like I was 8, and she looked at me with her jaw set tight against the cold. Your grandmother would have clapped, child, she said, and went back inside to watch the second act. I sat in my car for 10 seconds, hands on the wheel, and let one long breath out, the kind you release when the ambulance doors finally shut. Then I drove 8 minutes through the falling snow to the orchard. Every window of that farmhouse was lit gold. Through the front glass I could see my son in his pajamas on Hal's shoulders, reaching up, and I watched Hal steady him while Caleb set the crooked gold star, the one that said Grandma L on the back, onto the top branch of the Chambers family tree. Some houses you knock. That one was already mine. Here's what January looked like, in plain numbers, since numbers started this. The transfer still leaves my account on the 1st of every month, $650, same as always. It just changed direction. It goes into Caleb's college fund now, and the first time I watched it land there, the knot under my ribs finally untied itself and left without a note. My mother called 11 times in 2 weeks. The voicemails ran the scale from hissing to honey and back to hissing, and the day she reached the part where I was destroying her reputation at the Guild, I blocked the number. The Guild, for the record, handled things the way small towns do. No trial, no verdict, just a quiet spring luncheon committee list with a different name at the top of hospitality. My sister sent exactly one text, "You've torn this family apart." I read it twice and put the phone down. Torn it apart? I'd only turned the lights on. What fell over was already leaning. From my father came a Christmas card, 10 days late, my name in his cramped print, and inside, wrapped in a paper towel, 2 $20 bills and 1 shaky line. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't send it back, and I didn't call. I put it in Travis's box, next to the card about telling the truth even when your voice shakes, because that drawer is where I keep the men who tried. My door isn't locked to my father. It just doesn't open for stories anymore. Truth is the password, and he knows it. And on Christmas morning, while a certain house across town sat quiet with its perfect tree, my son came down Ruth's staircase to cocoa and paper crowns, and Hal wore sleigh bells on his boots at 67, and the only party that ever mattered had a guest list of 4 and a crooked gold star presiding over all of it. I used to think family was the people who share your blood, but family is the people who make room for your child at the table without being paid to do it, and my son deserves to be where he's wanted, so that is exactly where we live now. That's my story. 24 months of transfers, 1 folded statement in a junk drawer, and a county stamp nobody could argue with. If this reminded you to verify before you send another dime, even to family, take it as your sign. Check the records. Protect your kids. If someone you love needs to hear this, share it with them. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.